Have you had an encounter with the king or the queen of the forest and you'd like to tell me and everyone else about it? Well, I can sure help you with that. Type out your encounter in an email and send it to me at contact@buckeyebigfoot.com. Oh, hey there, everyone. Now listen up. Tonight is another wild story. I'm telling you, this is something. So make sure your snackage is piled high. Get an extra tall drink while you're at it, and then get on up in the saddle. It's time we start moving, because I'm telling you, this one is so good. I can't wait. I was attending the Portland Community College in Portland, Oregon. While there, I met an incredible girl named Darlene. She was from West Virginia, and all jokes about hillbillies or rednecks aside, Darlene was raised in the mountains of West Virginia, and she was something straight out of Hank Williams Jr.'s song. I tell you, that girl could survive. She hunted, she fished, she understood agriculture like it was nobody's business on this earth but hers. Actually, she was there on the agricultural program at the college, while I was there on the engineering program. But between me and you, she was smarter than me. Anyway, we dated for over a year, and then came the night that we had a really bad fight. Darlene said it was time for us to take a break. I was heartbroken and mad, so I decided to blow off steam and go hiking somewhere around Mount Hood. I know, stupidest idea ever. I was not raised in the mountains. I was not one of those who could survive. I had only ever done light hiking before. I just wasn't an outdoorsy person. I can't explain to you the rationale I had at that time, other than I recall vaguely thinking, well, if I died out there, Darlene would feel bad about it forever. I know. It just doesn't make sense. I did have a cell phone at the time. It was a Motorola flip phone. This was 2005, by the way. So even if Darlene did try to call me, I knew she probably could never reach me. I don't know what cell coverage is out there now, but back then, I was lucky to get a signal inside a building. To this day, I can't even tell you right where I went, or where it was that I ended up, or where I came out at. I was mad, and I rage drove to the first trailhead I came across out there. Then I jogged on the trail for quite a while. I was walking, but my eyes weren't seeing, and my head was somewhere else, you know? Anyway, around mid-afternoon, I came to and I realized I wasn't sure where the heck I was. I had taken another trail off the main one, right? Or had I veered off on some third connecting trail? Maybe? Or did I? Or was it all the same trail? You see, I didn't know. Yes, stupid, I know. But when you're young, mad, and suffering from a broken heart, well, you are mostly a walking, stupid decision-making machine. Or I was, anyway. By then, I had walked off a lot of that rage, and that's when I began to wonder just where I was. I had borrowed a tent from someone I knew in housing, and I had never actually put it together. Again, another stupid move. So I didn't know where any camp areas were. I didn't know if I could just camp anywhere either. I'm telling you, I made a lot of rage and emotion-filled decisions that day and night. I guess I was lashing out in my own way. I'll say it just one more time. Stupid, and it makes no sense. Are you sensing a theme here? Remembering passing a half-moon cleared area along the trail further back that might be good to camp at, I backtracked the half-mile or so until I found it. But when I got there, I realized I would be fully exposed to the trail and anyone walking by. So I scattered a little further in on the trees on both sides, but there was nowhere that I could reasonably put a tent. It was getting later and later, and although it was May, it was getting dark there in the forest, long before the sun was down. Now, deciding that I'd rather be out there on the trail than away from it, I sat up in the half moon of grass just off the side of the trail. There was a log there, and I'm pretty sure it was used by hikers to sit and rest. Now, I'm not going to go into the blow-by-blow comedy of me trying to set up that tent with no instructions. I never did get it set right. I got it to where it was up in the middle and somewhat held down at most points on the ground. I think I was missing one of those bendy rod things that goes over the middle. Anyway, it would keep the rain and the dew off of me at least, so I thought. I saw another couple pass me before dark. We nodded, and they went on. Then it was nighttime quiet, which I was not prepared for. I had never in my life been out in dark woods alone. I had always had at least one companion. There was usually quiet talking, maybe a fire crackling. I had none of that. Night and the forests around Mount Hood are both noisy and quiet at the same time. If I had to pick a word, it would be unnerving. And when I say I hadn't thought things through about this whole thing, boy, do I mean it. I had 2 cans of soup with me, and I brought some crackers, but no can opener. Yeah, I didn't think this through. So I ate crackers for my dinner and made sure to take only light sips from my 1 bottle of water. I brought a sleeping bag and a flashlight with me, but there was no other form of light. So instead of running the flashlight down, I ate my crackers in silence as it was getting dark. Then I worked my way into my half-up tent, hoping to get to sleep fast so the morning would get there and I could work my way out of here, go home and see if Darlene had been worried about me being gone all night. Because here's the most epic, stupid thing I did. I left without telling almost anyone that I even intended to go hiking. I mean, other than the guy that I got the tent from and a few of the other things that he loaned me, well, no one knew at all. And I never told that guy just where I was planning to go, partly because I wasn't so sure. Now, real adults would ask each other those kinds of questions. Where are you going? How long are you going to be gone? But being in college, no one did. It was just, hey, go, have a great time, see you later, buddy. So I left without telling anyone, and I did that deliberately. I wanted Darlene to worry. I imagined she would try to call me in the middle of the night, probably to apologize and say she wanted to get back together. And when she couldn't get a hold of me, well, I imagined she would be in agony. I wanted her to miss me. I wanted her to be as miserable as I was. Again, all supremely stupid, I know. Especially the part about not telling someone that I was planning to go or where to. That, I know, is a classic missing person move, isn't it? So I ate my crackers, hoping that Darlene had figured out that I was gone by then. I went into my tent, assuring myself she was already getting upset and worried, and tomorrow I would find her repentant and apologetic. I laid there in that tent and tossed and turned, imagining 1,000 scenarios where me and Darlene reconciled. So I was very awake when I heard loud footsteps pounding on the dirt trail. I thought, who's out here hiking at night? In my mind, I figured they must really need to get somewhere. Then I thought, maybe they're hurt, or maybe they were going for help for someone else that was hurt somewhere else on the trail. Worried about that, I unzipped my tent to look out. I was expecting to see a light bobbing down the trail toward me. But there was no light at all, and there were no more footsteps. They had stopped the second my zipper made any noise. Now, with my head still hanging outside the zipper opening, I didn't breathe or move. I was afraid that any noise I made would help them home in on me in the dark. And somehow, I knew I did not want to be found by them. Just seconds before, they had seemed to be maybe someone that I could help, that I would be willing to help. but suddenly they seemed to be someone I knew to fear. I had a lot of thoughts fly through my mind in less than a second, but the one thing they all had in common was that I was in danger. I don't know how I knew. I just knew. I could almost taste the danger in the dark air surrounding me. Eventually, though, I had to take a breath, and I tried to do it as quietly as possible. Slowly, I pulled my head back inside the tent. I didn't risk zipping it up, though. I knew the tent was no protection by any means, but having my head sticking out, well, that was really no protection. In the still quiet of the night, I clearly heard snapping of forest debris on the ground. I knew then that whoever it was, they had gone off the trail and working their way around the half moon, flanking me. I heard one step with tiny snapping sounds. Then there were a few seconds of silence. Then I would hear another snap several feet further away. It was picking its footsteps carefully in the dark. That is when I broke out in a sweat. I knew that if it had been a bear, it would not be working on being so stealthy. At least, that's what I had always heard. Bears charge you, don't they? They charge right at you, even in a bluff. And cougars were in Oregon, I knew, but I had been told they were not in that area. I also wasn't sure how cougars hunted, but I thought they dropped down on you from high areas. I wasn't ready to bet my life on it, though. Suddenly something tugged hard on the tent and I screamed. I had my flashlight out and I was wiggling out of the tent when I tumbled almost face first into something large and hairy that walked right in front of me. As soon as contact was made, it moved and I screamed again. I can't imagine what I might have looked like. Everything about this is a bit blurry, so bear with me. I do remember getting my flashlight turned on and screaming again and again when I saw massive furry legs just a few feet from me. I screamed again and again because my first thoughts flashed from bear to not bear. And if not bear, well, that was even scarier. I lifted my flashlight upward, and I saw a face that not even a Sasquatch mother could love. It looked down at me as if it was deciding whether or not to crush me like some puny ant under its massive foot. Now, seeing a Sasquatch, well, that's scary enough. But being on your back and looking up at one towering over you, that's another level of scary that simply cannot be described. To this very day, I have never experienced a more bone-piercing fear than that moment. I lived through a 4-car pileup and spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Even that didn't scare me as much when I saw it coming. The legs were very beefy and muscular, and without being weird, I saw it was male. I couldn't help but notice the hairy pouch, we'll say, from my angle on my back. The thick legs went to a thicker waist that then went up to a thicker chest that protruded out several inches over the lower abdomen. It was slightly bent, looking down at me. The face, I tell you, it was terrifying. Of course, I was shining my flashlight up on it, sort of the way people do when they tell stories at a campfire. So all those shadows, well, they weren't helping. The bony brow over the eyes, that was very visible, and the forehead sloped from that bone up and back. It was like a big, hairy coconut half. I've never been able to look at a coconut again. The eyes were black marbles in the light, and with the light shining straight up, they were sort of squinted. Though let me state that the light was not directly in its eyes. The massive jaws jutting out blocked a lot of the light that was coming up, so the eyes were slightly shielded. The fur was 3 or 4 inches long. It was very dense, and I saw no skin under that fur even when it moved. The only skin I saw was the face, the palms of its hands, and the bottom of its feet. Now that skin was a dusky dark gray color. while the fur was a minky dark brown. Now here is where my memory fails me. I don't know why or what to tell you, just that I have no clear memory. I believe the Sasquatch picked me up. I believe it walked further down the trail with me, but I have no memory of this exactly, and I don't know how much time passed before I woke up or came back to my senses, or just how much time my mind might have blocked out. All I know is the next memory I have, I am hitting the ground. I don't mean that I was thrown. It was more like being dumped to the ground, like a sack of potatoes. I tell you, it hurt. It was still dark, and I no longer had my flashlight. I don't know how long I stayed just like that. I remember that everything hurt very badly, and I wanted to move to relieve pain and stress on my legs and my left arm, which I was laying on. But I was too scared to move. Something told me to play dead, even though I was very awake. I did not move. I tried to keep my breathing as shallow and unnoticeable as possible. Somehow I knew the Sasquatch was still nearby, probably within just a few feet, although I couldn't see it. I cannot express the level of my fear to you. All this time, though, the Sasquatch had made not a single sound, not one. Without meaning to, though, I popped my eyes open when I suddenly heard a strange noise that I can only call a voice. It called out from nearby, and the Sasquatch that I had suspected to be near me answered. And I was right. He was very near me. I heard him get up. I heard him walk. I heard brush move. I heard them talking. I could tell they were a little ways away from me. They were somewhere way behind me, I thought. I swiveled my eyes around in the darkness, then slowly moved my head to look around. I could see the tops of their heads against a lightning sky. Dawn was coming. They were perhaps 30 feet away. I could tell they were not looking in my direction. I didn't know if I was really brave enough to move. I knew that I had to, but I had no plan. I thought about it for a few minutes, debating with myself when was the right time. I have to say that I'm glad my indecision caused me to wait just a little longer. You see, either that Sasquatch was gay or he started to get, well, loving with his female. I will not describe how or why I am certain of what was going on. Truthfully, I really would like to forget every aspect of it, but his inattention allowed me to quietly scoot and crawl a few more feet away. From there, I slowly got up, and I made a quick break for it. The only other thing I'll say about this is when they get together, they're kind of loud, and apparently it's not a quick affair. Those things, and those things alone, are the only things that saved me that day, or that morning, I should say. As soon as I could no longer hear them, I picked up my speed, and I ran blindly for probably close to half an hour, maybe an hour. Eventually, it was light in the sky, and I came out onto a forest road. After a while of walking along the road, someone came down that road. They stopped, and I told them I just need to get back to the civilization that I had left. I don't even remember what I had told them. They let me ride in the back of their truck. No, I did not tell them what had happened to me. That entire day, that entire month, everything seemed surreal. When I thought about it, it was like I was remembering someone else's memory. It wasn't mine. It wasn't me that happened to. I now have been made to understand that is a classic self-preservation response to trauma. I couldn't even admit to myself what had happened. All the way riding out of there, and while I was riding in the back of the truck, I had every expectation that Sasquatch was going to burst out of the trees and grab me. What happened during the time I got out of my tent and realized it was a Sasquatch out there, and the time that I came to from being dumped on the ground, I do not know. I have waited for years for that memory to resurface, but it never has. I've tried hypnosis, and that didn't work. Of course, I'm not so sure the hypnotist believed me when I explained the memories I was trying to recover. Now, why it took me is as much of your guess as it is mine. I have a terrible feeling I was about to be the equivalent of an after-happy time snack for him and his mate. I don't know, maybe he thought I was already dead. Maybe I was going to be some kind of a pet. I have played the maybe game with myself for almost 20 years. I have no answers, but I have had a lot of nightmares. Even now, living in the suburbs of a heavily populated Massachusetts, I make sure I take the garbage cans out to the curb before it gets dark. There's just something about standing in the dark night air, no matter where I am, even in the middle of a city. It just makes me shudder, and it sends me fleeing for light and shelter. Truth is, I have never really gotten over that night. I will say one thing. When I got back to my housing in Portland, I suddenly no longer cared that Darlene didn't care for me anymore. Suddenly, she didn't matter at all. Darlene who? When this happened, I, of course, had heard of Sasquatch as I was living there in Oregon. I'd been made aware from things on television as well. But I'd also heard of the Loch Ness Monster. I'd heard of vampires and werewolves, too. That didn't mean I believed in them or expected to run into them. Eventually, my fear subsided enough that eventually I did go looking for answers and information. I wanted to know what happened. Why did it take me? Did anybody have that answer? I didn't know. But I went looking, and sure enough, I then found the Albert Ostman story. I think I read it 100 times. I think I read 100 different articles written 100 different ways on his story. And every time I shuddered imagining being held by those things for almost a week. Just a few hours was too much for me. I have rarely told anyone this story. First, it was just too traumatic. I couldn't even put it into words to tell someone. I couldn't even admit to myself what had happened. I tried desperately just to block it out, just to get on with the business of going to college and living. I could not think on it. When I finally did make myself think on it, it brought up horrible nightmares that lasted for months. And for many months, my days were terribly unsettled. I was nervous, on edge. It affected my studies, so I buried them deep again. Then years went by, and now being very far away from Oregon, being older, and having a little more introspection, I have tried to go over these memories. I have written down what I could remember, and I am sending it to you now. Do whatever you want with it. Please know I will not answer questions, so don't ask me. I am sending this as a form of cathartic measure. It has been written, and I imagine that as I write it, it is leaving me with each word. This memory no longer lives inside of only me. With every keystroke, I wash it away. That is my deepest hope, so do with it what you will, but it's no longer me or mine. Please, do not use my name in any way. Well, there you have it, my Sasquatch. I told you it was a wild story. I've been doing this channel for about 5.5 years now, and I don't think I've had another actual kidnap, for lack of a better word, encounter sent in to me. I guess they were Sasquatch napped. I don't really know what the word would be, but I read this and I was blown away. I don't blame them for not really wanting to relive that. You know, there's no telling with Sasquatch what that intention was, and I guess we will probably never know. I pray that, well, Mr. Anonymous, that you can move past it and forget it. Otherwise, folks, I wish you all a wonderful evening. It's a nice autumn evening here in Southwest Ohio. I hope it's good where you are. We'll be meeting up again soon, and until we do, please always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.